Hi all, it's Rambler here with a bit of a political ramble, which wasn't intentional in terms of me actually doing this, but Halika, bless his soul, actually commented on my most recent video and said, "Hey, Neo, you're into the whole George Orwell's 1984 thing," which if you don't know I am. I've read the book, it's very scary, and I'm very adamant that that's what's happening to our society at the moment, and a lot of the things that happen in that book, 1984 that is, has actually happened, albeit even more disturbingly it's happened without the government's input. But anyway, that's beside the point. Read the book, you'll understand what I mean. He said, "Have you heard of Sesame credit? And what do you think about it in terms of your, fascination with 1984? And he left me a link in the comments section to a video that actually really does succinctly explain what Sesame Credits is by a channel called Extra Credits. And if I remember, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. And then obviously if you like that sort of thing, then go ahead and explore the rest of his channel. Or her channel, I don't know. But it sounds like a him. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Gender non-specific. The point being is Halika said, what do you think about it overall? And I thought I'd sort of respond with an actual video as opposed to a comment because, it's a very passionate thing about me in terms of what's happening with the world right now. And although I've been political in the past and I've been political in a sort of negative way, which fair enough, I admit, I didn't do it to intentionally be negative. I did it because that's what I believe politically. And if people perceive it as a negative thing, then, well, that's your own thing. This particular issue is quite scary, but it's also inevitable. But at the same time, there is something you can do about it if you're concerned. Now, to begin with, what is Sesame Credit? Well, basically what's happened is in China, they've decided to launch a system, that being the government, whereby rather than, say, having in the West a credit score, which we have at the moment in the UK and the Americas and a lot in the Western systems, where no matter what happens, you have what's known as the score, whereby it measures how well you are able to pay back money in terms of the fact that if you've borrowed money for loans or a mortgage or anything like that, or even if you've been in overdraft with your bank account, it measures how well you're able to pay back, whether you pay back correctly on the right date, whether you pay back frequently or pay it all back straight away, etc., etc. And with this credit score, if it's high, it means that banks and people who will loan you money on an official level will more likely loan you that money. And better yet, loan you it at a better rate, i.e. they'll loan you it and not expect such a high interest rate back off you, so you can pay it back but not have to pay back too much more. However, if your credit score is low because you failed to make that odd payment, or you just borrow a large amount of money but you can't pay it all back, or you've defaulted, etc., etc., then it's harder for you to borrow money and you get penalised for it to the point where maybe they won't lend you money at all, that being banks or people in official levels. And it can really hurt you if you depend on that kind of thing. So that's one way that the West has got in terms of having a measure of you. But in China, they've taken it one step further. Rather than have that in terms of a level of your credit score, they've created this Sesame credit, which is basically your social credit. In other words, it measures how well you fit into Chinese society. And specifically, it measures how well you obey and work with the government's regulations. So in other words, if you're a citizen in China who obeys what the government says, you believe what the government says, and not only that, you spread it to your friends, and you're friends with people who believe in the same thing. They believe in the government, they carry out the government's will, etc., etc., you get a very high Sesame credit. And rather than punish you for having a low credit, they reward you for having a high credit. So if you have a very high Sesame credit score because you've done everything the government's asked you and more, in terms of the fact that you hang out with people who do the same thing and spread the message, then you get access to lower rates of loans, you get access to bonuses, you get access to the occasional gimmicky things, etc., etc. You're rewarded by the system for your loyalty to the system. And in a way, I won't say you're advanced higher in the system, but you're given the idea, you're given the illusion that you're higher than everyone else. Whereas if you deny the government in terms of the fact that you don't listen to what they say, you rebel against it, or you think differently, or you come up with alternative ideas to life, or you project an image of yourself where with your friends and family you don't like what the government's doing, you get a low Sesame score, and that can have implications. Now, at the moment in 2016, the government of China have said that there's no penalties. Sounds fair enough. But there are penalties, but it isn't penalties via the government, it's penalties via society. I'll get to that in a minute. And not only that, what's even scarier about this whole system is that by 2020, it's going to be mandatory for every Chinese person within China, and possibly people who move to China as well, etc. They have to have this Sesame credit score, and they have to work with it and abide by it. And if they don't, they will fail, they will suffer. And that's really scary, because if you haven't read 1984, such as myself, which I'm sure a lot of you have, but if you haven't, go check it out. But by the way, before you do, make sure you're in a positive mindscape and you're not too easily depressed. Otherwise, it might finish you off mentally, and I mean that. It's bad, because not only is the government able to police what you do, what you say, and how you behave, they're policing it in a way where they're not directly involved, because the government knows that the pressure involved in maintaining a high Sesame credit is nothing to do with them. It's the fact that with this Sesame credit system, and I suppose with a credit score as well, but it's not necessarily reflected in that way in the West, because, you know, personally I have a credit score and I don't give a flying F. I just tell the bank, if you won't lend me the money, then go away. I'll go and find a bank that will. And banks panic then, because if you challenge them on that, then they will lend you the money in a more favourable terms. It's called negotiations. In China, however, if you sort of, you know, scuff it and decide not to mess around with it, you're going to get into trouble. But the pressure doesn't come from the government, it comes from the society who takes part in it. In other words, when they launched this system back in 2015, early adopters have got onto it and have done their best to get high scores. Now, the early adopters are definitely going to be dwarfed in numbers compared to the people in China who haven't adopted it. However, what happens is with those early adopters who adopt to it, adapt it, and get a high score will start boasting about it to others in their circles and in their areas. And social pressure, which happens when you're part of a large society, will pressurize those who aren't involved in this to take part in it. Because, of course, not only have these people who have early adopters got high scores, if they've chosen to get those high scores, but also they've been rewarded by it by the system. And that puts pressure on their fellow friends, family, lovers, etc. Then they, the second adopters, will start to adopt it and then spread it to their adopters, etc. And it has a knock-on effect. And China is hoping, in terms of the government, by 2020, it'll be mandatory, not because, you know, oh, well, everybody's going to force to have it because the majority of people haven't done it. They're hoping by 2020 that the majority of people have adopted it by themselves in terms of free choice. Now, what's wrong with that? You know, at the end of the day, you have free choice on the system at the moment. If you're living in China and you know about the system, you've got the choice to adopt it or not. The government isn't forcing you to do it. Great, that's a good thing. However, society is growingly forcing you to have it. So by refusing to have it, you're not only refusing what the government wants you to do, or at least refusing the government's option to take part in it, but you're also refusing society. And for most people, society is more important than the government. Now, I am aware of the system in terms of speaking to Halika personally. I've been aware of the system since it was incepted back in 2015, but I haven't spoken about it because I haven't heard much about it since. I don't know how well it's doing in China. The only thing that I know about is what Halika's just told me about in terms of an old video, which by extra credits just explained it, but it was back in 2015. So is it taking off or not? That I don't know. You'll have to explore for yourself. But the point of this video is that, aside from explaining it all, what it is, etc., it's just my reaction to it. And I am concerned, as someone who is scared of Big Brother and society sort of doing a police state thing. If the Chinese government are able to get away with this, then by 2020, if they make it mandatory and it works for them, not because they forced it, but because society have accepted it and enforced it themselves, it will spread to other nations. Now, you could be thinking, you could be sitting here or standing here or listening to this thinking, well, haven't we already got this near in terms of Facebook, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, etc.? Don't we already put enough social pressure on ourselves with these social media networks, because we're always trying to compete with other people on said networks? We're competing with people we know, we love, we care about, because at the end of the day, it is a very typical human nature thing whereby you compare your life to others you know, and if they're doing better than you, you get angsty, depressed and upset, and you want to do better than them. You get competitive, or you get succumbed to it and you start feeling upset about it and it beats you up, and vice versa. Aren't we already doing that? Well, probably, yes, you're quite right. So we probably already are with Facebook, Twitter, etc. We probably already are, but it's not mandatory. You know, you can stay away from that if you want. And I do, personally. The only social thing I have is YouTube, and I don't feel any pressure involved in it, except for the pressure I impose on myself, which is that when I launch a video or release a video on my channel, people seem to watch it, like it, or dislike it, and leave me comments. And then they leave me advice, or they leave me games to play, or they even gift me games when I've asked them to. And that's the only pressure I go by, because I want to satisfy the demand that's there. However, I will not satisfy anybody's demand in terms of being like them, or being into the things they like, or obeying what the government says, etc., etc. I don't follow that. I have my own opinions. For example, I supported leaving the European Union, where many of my friends didn't. They wanted to stay in. And one of the friends that I loved to bits and actually had a massive crush on and loved her, split up with me in terms of the fact that, you know, she wants nothing to do with me because I voted to leave the European Union and she voted to stay. She considers herself a European citizen, and not only that, a global citizen. I told her that she was being silly. But that's that. That's what happens. If you involve politics, it can happen. But I've stood by it. I've lost her as a friend. I miss her to bits. I think about her daily. But it is what it is. That's politics. But I still stand by political decision, in that I think the UK leaving the European Union is a good thing. Not just for us as UK people, but also for Europe in itself. Because I believe Europe has become too federal, it's become too interlinked, and it wants to become this federal state in terms of the European Parliament and European significant figures. I don't believe that citizens of France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Portugal, and all of the Western developed Greece, all of the Western developed European countries that took part in it want to be. They want to be themselves. They want to be Portuguese, Italian, French, German, etc. And they want to share their culture by their own free will with others. They don't want to be forced into it, nor do they want to bond and be with the others, so that they no longer become German, Italian, French, etc. They become European, which is what the European Parliament wants. They don't want this state of countries working together. They want a complete European state, where basically Europe becomes Europe. There will be no France, there will be no Germany, there will be no Italy, there will be no Portugal, etc. It'll just be Europe. And I don't want that. Sod that, because that just means that if you do that and you give up your own personal identity, it makes it easier for people in power to just take hold of you as cheap labour. In other words, I see it as an amalgamation of people and cheap labour for freedom of labour, and it's bad. It's very, very bad. But that's just me. A lot of people counter-argue that and say it's really good. A lot of people counter-argue that and say you should be thinking about equality, equal rights, freedom of movement, etc. We are all the same in terms of being human beings. Why would you not want to be the same thing? But I've said my point. I like being who I am. That doesn't mean I'm superior to everybody else. It doesn't mean I'm inferior to everybody else. It just means that I am who I am, and I want to be able to freely choose who I want to be with and who I don't want to be with. And I think everybody else who thinks along those lines would agree with me. But anyway, my point being is that is in itself an analogy, an example of how we have political freedom. But if this Sesame credit system does become mandatory and takes hold of China, I guarantee you the Western system will find a way to make it mandatory over here. But a lot of it is down to you. It's down to you as a person, and you in terms of your ability to handle social pressure, because that's what the government's relying on, especially the Chinese one. The reason why this is so clever and dangerous is because the government isn't forcing you to do it, at least not yet. They're hoping by 2020 that the majority of Chinese people will have adopted it. And the only pressure, the only means that this will work is if everybody caves into social pressure. In other words, it creates a completely new but almost the same hierarchical system, in that rather than having money as being the means of denoting if you're rich, powerful, successful, and you can look down at the poor people and the middle class and upper class and working class, etc. At least that's what it is in the UK, and I'm sure there's a similar system elsewhere around the world. You have this social system instead. Are you socially able? Are you socially acceptable? Are you socially with the times? Are you socially accepting what the government says? Are you a social outcast? It just makes it easier for authoritative figures, be it in society and the government, to oust those who have alternative ideas. And it also enforces those who are in power to stay in power for as long as possible. And it's scary. But unlike George Orwell, who predicted that the government would do it themselves, they would enforce it, strictly impose it, kill anyone who wouldn't agree with, torture anyone who wouldn't agree with, and have this thought police thing where it's all government controlled. And the idea being in Orwell's universe does that the government stays on top, everybody else stays down, and they keep kicking you down, and they stay on top. The government's saying, well, we can do the same thing, but we don't have to do the dirty work. Society will take care of it for us because we've studied psychology. We get social psychology with large groups of human beings in terms of countries, groups, etc. Let's just take advantage of it. And that's what they're doing. So, what is the point in this whole video overall? Because I'm going to end it. My point being is that I am scared of it, but I'm also not scared of it. I am happy to turn around and say I will not be a part of this system. And if that means the end of my life in the future, then so be it. I am happy to say that not just as a Westerner, but as a citizen of this planet, and I say that with air quotation marks, that I wouldn't allow such a system in my place. And if it did happen, I would punch and kick and hurt everybody who believed in it. Because you are fools and idiots to think that you're being rewarded. Because rather than using negative enforcement, which they've done in the past in terms of the government trying to get you to obey them, they're using positive enforcement. If you obey this Sesame credit system in China, you'd be rewarded, as opposed to punished if you didn't. And that's the thing. The difference is they're using positive reinforcement, and that has a huge effect on society. If you're being enforced positively to do something well, it does have a massive psychological effect on you, not just as a group, not just as a society, but also as an individual. It's a basic psychological principle. If you get positively reinforced for doing the right thing, you're more likely to do said thing, to maintain that reward, to maintain being praised. People like it. I like it. I'm not immune to it. I love being praised, and I love being rewarded for things that I do right. And I want to keep doing that to get more rewards, to be more praised, to be accepted. I love that. I'm not the only one. But when it's being done, not really for you, but it's being done for manipulative, constricting, destructive purposes to keep you down and keep them up with the illusion that you're being rewarded, the illusion that you're being praised and raised in your ability and status as someone who follows the system, such as with this Sesame credit, you're a fool. And you should not be zombified by it. Now, I do believe, as much as I've been paranoid about it, I do believe it will fall apart. I do believe it might have a significant impact on China and maybe to some degree the world, but I do believe it will fall apart. I do believe that human beings out there will say to one another and say to the masses and say to the people in authority, we've had enough of this crap. As much as we live in a society now, especially in the West, where we're succumbed to easy pleasures, easy consumables, easy vices, etc., we still have that ability to turn around and say, F you. Case in point, the EU referendum in the UK. Over half the people. Mind you, a slim majority, though. I will concede that. But a slim majority, nonetheless, still turn around and say we don't want to be part of the EU. And we didn't say that because, oh, we don't know what's going on. Oh, we don't understand the benefits, blah, blah, blah. No, we do understand the benefits. But we didn't feel them. We didn't get them. We didn't like them. They weren't benefits to us. They were failures. And a lot of people who believe in the system believe that we are wrong. Fair enough. But I believe, as well as those other 52% of people, that I was right. We don't feel it. And those people who feel that we're wrong, I challenge them now to come to where I live, stay where I live, and enjoy it. Or at least live it and feel the benefits. So be it. You won't. You will not. Go to the north if you're from London and all that. Go and live up there for a year. You tell me you feel the benefits, because I guarantee you won't. Because it's not there. But anyway, this isn't a political statement. This isn't a challenge. The point being is this credit system. It's scary. It is. Really scary. But we'll see what happens. Society will lap it up initially. But I also believe that society, or at least a portion of society, will turn around and say, this is bullshit. Excuse my language, but there you go. And I do believe that that bullshit will win in the end. Even George Orwell in 1984 said the way that the system can collapse is if the masses uprise and go against it. It's unlikely in George Orwell's universe, but it's still there. In our day and age, it's even more likely. I still believe in that. I still believe that humanity isn't perfect. We can be evil, we can be scum, but we can be charitable, we can be good. But I do believe Western and Eastern worlds, Northern, Southern worlds, more economically developed and less economically developed, I still think overall we know when we're being dicks with, and we know what's right and we know what's wrong, we know what benefits us and we know what doesn't. I believe we still know that, and we will do for a long time to come. Even if it slowly gets diminished like some people think, it is still there. I still believe you as a person, as an individual, and as you as a representative of your country, your society, your group, whatever it is you choose to stand for, you have a voice and you choose to believe and say what is good for you, what isn't, what you believe in, what you don't, and what you'll accept and what you will not accept. You have that power, and I still believe in that adamantly, and because of that I'm able to sleep easy at night. Look at history. Look at the Roman Empire, massive, then collapsed. Look at the Greek Empire, massive, then collapsed. Look at Nazi Germany, really did grow, killed a lot of innocent people, killed a lot of Jews, killed a lot of homosexuals, etc, etc. It was horrible, but they collapsed. Then I honestly, from history alone, tells me that nothing can get too big without it collapsing. And it doesn't collapse from external influences. It actually collapses from inside, from within. So I believe in that. So no, I'm not worried about the Sesame credit system. I'm not worried about this. It will have an effect, but I do believe it's not permanent. What I do believe in now, and this is the last thing I will say, I promise I'm finishing it now, is this. This is my word of wisdom. If you've listened to all of this, thank you so much. I'm really appreciative of it, because it's nice to have people listen to this, even if it's only bits of it, and tell me I'm right or wrong, or agree or disagree. I love it. I do, because it means I'm being listened to. It gives me value, which is what we all seek. But I will leave you with this. The only currency you have to spend as an individual is not money. It's not materialism. It's not spiritualism. It's not anything that you can think of. The only thing you have to spend in your life as currency is time. You have a finite time on this planet, and you have a finite time to spend. So do I. And guess what? Unlike other forms of currency, you can't save time. You can't put it away for later use. You spend it, you spend it, you spend it. Best way to deal with it is to either spend it in the way you know how and you enjoy yourself, and spend it in the way you want, or you work hard and put some time into working hard, in that the time you have left afterwards is lived in pleasure. But that's up to you. I'm not telling you how to do it. I know how I'm doing it, and I've had my successes and failures. There is no right or wrong way to do it. But that's the only thing that matters to everybody on this planet. It isn't the government. It isn't authority. It isn't society. It isn't politics. It isn't racism or political correctness. It's time. You have time to spend on this planet, and you have to spend it whether you like it or not. So spend it in the way you want to. Not what your friends want, not what the government wants, not what the authority wants, not what society wants. You. You spend it the way you want. That is the way to live life. You have so much time. Spend it and enjoy it. Invest if you wish, by all means. And I don't mean invest in money, I mean invest in your time. But that's all you've got. That's all I've got. That's all this government's got. That's all this society's got, is time. So stop dicking around. Stop telling me I'm wrong. Stop telling everybody else you're wrong or they're wrong. And stop telling around that you're right or they're right, etc. Just spend your time in the way you want to. Expect pleasure, but expect resistance. But either way, if you can turn to me and say I'm spending my time as I want, I have nothing but respect. I will salute, tip my hat off and say, well done. Even if I disagree with you and hate your guts, I cannot disrespect you for spending the time the way you want. So go for it. Now that you know, think about how much time you got left. Spend it how you want. Until then, can I say thank you very much for listening to this if you have done. Sorry for this being quite political and quite sincere, but hey, it was a question. That's my answer to it. Tell me what you think. And until then, take it easy. Have a good one. Hope you're well. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.